Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of a couple of different items from one company, and that is Lochby, spelled like Lochby right on there. But first off, before I go any further, I want to tell you that these guys were provided to me by Lochby. They sent them along. They said, hey Nick, we got a line of products, might be interesting to EDC enthusiasts. Figured, hey, sure, why not? But as always, I told them I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. That it might be a gem, might be junk. They did still send it along. Nonetheless, we have to assume these are the very best quality controlled items ever, and I'm doing my best not to let any of this affect the nature or quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison real quick. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the Spyderco Delica here, as well as your standard Bic Click Stick sort of pen, so you can kind of get a sense of what we're looking at here. And in fact, I have a variety of items on the table that I'm gonna show you here. To start with, what we have is the Field Journal, which is this little full-size guy right here. We have a Pocket Journal, which is this little not full-size guy right here. We have the Quatro, which is a little pen holder sort of affair. This little guy right here. And then we actually have a tool holder, which I'll talk about in a bit, and that's this guy right here, which is really hard to balance a pen on. So anyways, those are the various options that we have here. And what I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the items themselves rather than doing 4 different videos. I'm just going to talk about each item, talk about some of the stuff I like, I don't like, and then I'll give some final conclusions at the end, and we'll take it from there. So we'll actually start off here with this tool roll here. So the tool roll is quite literally that, right? And many of you in the knife community are going to be familiar with the idea of a knife roll. This is effectively the same thing, just for pens and other kinds of things. And I've gone ahead and I've loaded it up with some everyday carry style gear. But what we see here is that what we have is just a rolling up sleeve here that kind of, well, not so much locks, although kind of locks it. It's not like a lock. Anyways, I'm going to leave the semantics of that action aside. All that you have here is a bunch of different items with a pocket on the end here. And then you've got a bit of elastic here, as well as pockets down here in the back as well that you can use to carry things. And this is actually a really nice little item. I think it works pretty well. This is, I think, aimed primarily at pen people, right? Because these guys over here are really best suited to holding pens, right? And I've got some normal size pens here of a variety, urban survival gear, tactile turn, etc. But these are really best suited for pens. You've got the ones in the middle here that can certainly work with a pen, but are also suitable for exceptionally thin pocket knives or other kinds of tools. Then you've got 2 in the middle here, which are actually big enough to work with a variety of knives. Certainly not every pocket knife out there, but a variety of knives will fit just fine in that area. So we've got tactile turn Rockwell, Chris Reeves Shabazz 31 small, and the Spyderco PM2. All of those will fit in there, and you could probably slip something into the back there, but it's basically a tool roll, right? That's the fundamental thing to it. And, overall, my feelings here are, well, on the good side, and this will, by the way, apply to all these things because they're all made of the same fabric. I do like this fabric. It's not the heaviest stuff ever. You look at it and you think, oh, canvas, it's going to be thick. It really actually isn't, but it works pretty well. And it's got a very nice, vaguely military feel, a little bit of waxation to it. And they actually sell extra wax, so you can, really do it up big if you want to think. And I think, honestly, it'll go really well with a bunch of people in the everyday carry community's sort of overall aesthetic. Right, I think in that way it is pretty well chosen. So I do like the fabric overall, and I think it works pretty well. Whether I like the internal fabric, I don't know about the orange as much, but you know what? Hey, whatever, not a big deal. Other good things about this guy, one detail that's very nice is this little flap right here. Because this little flap covers up the clips of this area here. And then when you fold it over, these clips here are facing this fabric. Then when you fold it over again, these clips here are facing this fabric. What that means is you're never going to be in a situation where 2 clips are rubbing against each other. That's prevented by virtue of having that flap. And that's a really nice thing, right? It makes sure that, the tools that you're keeping in there aren't wearing on each other, rubbing each other down. That's great. I really do appreciate that very much. I also appreciate the fact that we have these flaps to either top, right? The reason for these kinds of flaps is to prevent escapes. If I were to put something in here completely loose, if it were to work its way out of the situation, and then I roll this guy up, there's still no way for that pen to escape because it's stuck underneath that flap. It would have to come out around somehow or another and go past this. So this does actually offer a much more secure hold than something without that, where it's really relying on the clip to keep it inside the strap. So I like that very much. I do like very much the fact that we've got plenty of pockets here. We got this guy here, we got these guys in the back here. All of those are very nice and it'll allow you to store some kind of miscellaneous gear, although it is worth noting that if you put something too stiff in there, that will affect the rolling action overall, right? You do want to have a fair amount of flexibility back here. So that is something to keep in mind. It does have, and I think it is a really nice choice, that is, for somebody who wants to, for instance, travel with a bunch of pens, pen-like tools, that kind of thing. That's where I really see this excelling. And whether travel means like travel in the classical sense, to get on a freaking plane, or just toss this in your bag and, you know, go about your daily life, this could work too. And if you're somebody with like a pen light and a bunch of other stuff, I can totally see this being something, you know, worthwhile for you. On the bad side, like I said, I'm not sure I love the interior color. It's kind of a... I think maybe marigold or something like that is about the closest I can give you to it. It's someplace between yellow and orange, but either way, whatever, not a huge deal. Not going to lose it, certainly, from the inside. Next thing, and I'm going to mention this again later on with the field journal, I don't love this clasp. The clasp works okay, right? If you give it plenty of slack there, you can kind of jam this in here and get underneath. And the thing is, it's not going anywhere once it's locked down, that's for damn sure, but it's just kind of a pain in the neck to use. This is probably my least favorite fabric clasp ever. If they had done things a little bit differently, where you had a little bit more of a grabbing surface there so I could hook this a little bit more readily, it's something that works, but each time it's a little bit of a pain in the neck, right? It's also relatively bulky, being a bent piece of metal like this. I just don't care for this clasp. I think that's probably one of the bigger weaknesses of this piece right here. There is definitely a capacity limit here, although that's true of any container, right? But, you know, you're only going to be able to hold so many things, and especially if you're looking at larger items, you're definitely, I mean, this is just pens, right? And this area is sort of intermediate, but you want to be careful about that. And, you know, the fact that a lot of these holes are relatively skinny is a little bit less than ideal. I'd sort of like to have seen another set like this over here that way. I don't know. It's not a big deal, and if you're really pen focused, then this is going to be great. Although again, in the middle here, then you've got two pens sharing one slot, which is fine generally, but you know, nonetheless, my overall feeling on this, guys, it's pretty solid and well designed for what it needs to be. I can definitely see somebody enjoying this for travel or just to keep in your bag to organize a bunch of smaller tools. So there's that. Next up is actually sort of the micro version of that, and that's the Quatro. Quatro is apparently a product category now rather than a number, but nonetheless, what we have here is four, predictably, slots like the other one has, except these are full-length pen pocket slots, and again, the opposition here of having clips on the top, means that you're never going to be touching metal on metal, which is going to keep your pens in nicer position. You know what, honestly, it's fine for what it is. It's a little pouch for 4 to maybe 6 pens, right? I could take another pen, slip it in here, and, you know, you might get a little pen-on-pen wear there, but at the end of the day, it absolutely works fine. And then on the outside of this guy, you actually have a Velcro pocket over here, as well as a, and by the way, it's worth noting, this is the same pocket along the back here, so there's just really 2 pockets here, as well as a pocket here and here, which are not Velcroed shut. But anyways, you know what, it works fine if you're just carrying 4 pens, whatever. One thing that's worth noting, though, is that you really do need a shallower pen. If you have a lot of length at the top, this isn't going to work well. So if I were to take my pen stolen from a Hampton Inn, sorry about that, Hampton Inn, and try and put it in there, it's going to stick out the top of this guy. So you really do need something that has, so let's see here, about 0.75 inches, about 2 centimeters worth of length at the top there is your max. So, you know, do keep that in mind. The other thing is it is very limited, right? This is something that is limited strictly, more or less, to pens or pen-like objects. So, you know, there is that. The Quatro here, honestly, to me, feels very niche. I'm not a huge fan of it. Whereas the tool roll, I think, would work with many things. This is really going to be dedicated to somebody who has, you know, maybe a collection of differently colored pens or something like that they want to throw in, or maybe they just switch between 4 pens during the course of the day. You know, in that case, sure, I can see it, as long as your pens meet the dimensional requirements and such. This is going to be fine, but this is something with, I think, maybe a little bit less universal appeal. I don't know that it's going to make a lot of sense to a lot of folks. Then we move on to the journal country. We'll start off with the pocket journal, which, by the way, people have some big pockets these days. I mean, seriously, holy crap, this guy is big. But anyways, this is a pocket journal, and it fits kind of your standard refill size. What is it? 2.5 by, oh, well, I guess I can measure it, right? 3.5 by 5.5 style journal, right? So, yeah, that is nice. And this whole thing fits a bunch of their different refill options. And in fact, they do have different options here. And that's the case for the big guy as well, where you have a dot grid style, which is being shown here, which, by the way, is amazing. I love me some dot grid papers because it can be lined if you want to consider it lined. It can be very nice for technical drawings, that kind of thing. You can also get, and I'm going to show you on the bigger guy, you can get a conventionally ruled sheet of paper. You can get a plain sheet of paper that is predictably plain. And you can get a wide ruled sheet of paper if that's your world. But anyways, so you can get a bunch of different options there. And the paper on these guys is very good. It's acid-free, and it's very nice for fountain pens. This is a nice writing experience on this paper here. They have more details on it out there, and I'm sure the stationery nerds are going to be like, oh my God, it's that? But nonetheless, it is good paper, right? As a guy who generally uses Rhodium notebooks, historically, this feels to be about in line with that, right? So I like the paper very much. It is also a standard size refill, which means that if you're not a big fan of the pricing, or if you just go through a lot of them, you could use something a little bit cheaper if you want to go, if you don't care as much about paper quality, right? And the refills, by the way, are $6 each, versus you can get, a generic in this size for like 3 for $10 or something like that. So you can save a buck there if you'd like to. Oh, by the way, I don't think I mentioned the price on these guys. This is $49 for the tool roll. The Quatro is looking at $34, and then this guy here is going to be going for $40 with a refill included on there. But anyways, so it is a standard size refill. The other thing that I do like on this guy are the external pockets. You have, again, the same situation. We have something in the back here with a Velcro attachment, and then here you get two on the outside. And this works well. This is totally fine. And then it does zip shut, which is nice, because when you have something that zips shut in this way, you can very easily do something like, oh, well, I got an important receipt. I'll just throw it in here and then, lock it in there. That can be nice, right? And so it allows it to be a little bit more of a stash beyond the journal. And that's exemplified by the fact that you actually have pockets here. You have a pocket like this, and then 3 pockets going this direction, which is sort of unusual. I would expect it to go vertically, but, hey, whatever. So if you have something that is, roughly the size of a pinky finger, you can put it in there. That's fine. Hey, good. But anyways, so to me, that's the good. They're on the bad side. None of their things are perforated, right? If you're ripping it out, you are ripping it out. And that's not a great thing, both for the structural integrity, because when you rip it out of one side, then there's less holding the other side in, right? It becomes easy. But I also just like the ability to, take out a page or something like that, right? I'm not a permanent notebooky sort of guy. Things that are permanent tend to get digitized. Things that are ephemeral, that are written out, I consider ephemeral. So getting rid of a pages I don't need anymore can be a helpful thing for me. Not a big deal, but it is a thing. Next thing, like I said, the Lochby brand refills are a little on the pricey side, $6 each, but the quality is solid, the paper is good. And like I said, it compares well with things like Rhodium and otherwise, so okay, no real complaints there. Next thing, the cover doesn't slip into the other side. I'm sort of used to on these things, it being the case that you can have the cover slide in over here as well, so that way when you open it up, you see in paper. Instead, they've gone with these pockets on the other side. Now, I don't necessarily understand that, because again, it's a very short pocket, right? Like, what are you going to be putting in this horizontal pen pocket that is this deep? Not a whole heck of a lot, right? So that doesn't really super make sense for me. Speaking of things that don't make sense, there's not an internal place for a pen on this guy. That is a very, very strange thing, right? What can be said is that you can very easily take a shorter pen. So this is the Tactile Turn Die Scribe Go. Tactile Turn, wow, Urban Survival Gear Die Scribe Go. You could also put a Tactile Turn pen in here. Those are good too. And you can kind of drop it in and close the whole thing up, and that works out okay. And there is also, I don't think think this is intentional, but what you can also do is slip something in behind the zipper. If the pocket clip is tall enough, you can do that, and then it kind of sits in there. It's a little bit awkward, certainly, but, nonetheless, you have that option, but I would have liked to have seen like a pen loop right here or something like that. It just seems a little bit strange, and then you're dealing with getting over the zipper and whatnot. Seems a little strange to me that there's no internal loop for a pen. And by the way, note you are going to be limited some in your pen size if you do this approach. I can just barely get the regular tie scribe bolt in there, and then, if I try to do it with like a big click stick, that'll fit. But if you go a little taller, starting to get sketchy. So you definitely have a limit here. Actually, I could phrase that limit more explicitly of about 5.5 inches, 13 centimeters, someplace in there. It's going to be the upper limit of pen that you can carry in here. So it seems a little weird that that's missing. Like I said, the pockets don't make a lot of sense. And the other thing is, honestly, if you have just a journal, right, you can toss that in your back pocket pretty readily, and that's not a problem. But if you have this entire affair containing a journal, that's a lot bulkier, right? I don't know what kind of pockets the Lochby folks are using these days, but these take up a heck of a pocket, right? This is a whole little organizer thing. So this kind of exists for me in an uncanny valley between something I might put in my pocket and something I might put in my pack. And so ultimately, my feeling is that there are like a billion little notebook covers for these. You can get any given leather worker makes 12 of them. And for me, at least, they tend to just make my pockets bulky and also slow down the ability to get into a notebook and such. So it's fine. You might love it, but it's probably the least compelling of the products to me. Then finally, we got this big guy here. This is their field journal, and don't mind this. This is a diagram. I was cutting a tabletop sort of affair. But anyways, nonetheless, so this is their field journal, right? And the field journal is a little bit different in that it is actually not just one notebook, but it is 4 notebooks held in one place. So I've got the cover tucked in on the side here. You can not do that and use this as a pocket here. But basically, what you got here is a big old Velcro packet on the back here. You've got then you've got these little strings here. And the little strings go right down the middle of the notebook here. So swapping out a refill is as easy as, pulling the thing out and reinserting that way, right? And so you have the option to carry up to 4 different notebooks in here of 4 different types if you'd like, or for the same thing. You can label them, etc. But that's kind of a cool approach, right? It's a little bit different. It's a little bit interesting. And so you get the same notebook options before, as you get like a dot grid, that kind of thing. You get that's very nice. And actually, the refills for this guy are a little bit on the pricier side. $9 a piece for the big size. Although again, you can find other ones that will fit in here if you'd like. But that's good. So you get the same notebook options that are refillable as before. You also get a nice carry handle on the back of this. It's not something I used a whole lot, but it was occasionally helpful if I was carrying this and 4 other things. Just throw a pinky around this, and that way you go in there. Next thing, the pockets on this are very nice. You get some standard card size pockets here. It's worth noting that this one is all the way down deep. It goes all the way down here, whereas these two are more card size. And then you have this guy up at the top here, which only goes down to here. And then you have one large pocket all the way in the back here. But you've got a bunch of different pocketation going on here, although on the back side here, it really, you just have the one large size here. So that's good. Next thing that's actually kind of interesting and worth noting is you have this little area right here. And I assume that this could actually be, that this is intended to hold on to your little keeper here as you are using the notebook there. But you could also potentially use it for a second pen or something like that. That's good. And then finally, I kind of like the 4 notebook approach. At first, when I saw it, I was like, that's really dumb. But actually, in practice, it turned out to be kind of nice. Because using this, and again, I've ripped out a lot of the pages that I used. Using this guy, I could have all of my things of one variety in one notebook, and then I had work stuff in another notebook, and then, etc. I think that works out pretty well. And then if you're an artist, you have a sketch pad one in the back there. I think for a lot of folks, that could be interesting to you. It allows you to kind of segment and compartmentalize parts of your life a little bit more than if you just carry one notebook around. And it also, you can get a planner sort of thing for this. So you could have one of these things be your day planner if for some reason you've not put that online. But anyways, nonetheless, the Planning is working fine there too. But the other thing that it can be helpful for is if you use notebooks faster in one domain than another part of your life. For instance, if you have a work notebook that is constant, like a lab notebook sort of thing, you're constantly using, then you might replace that notebook 4 times a month. But 4 times a month might be a little much, but hey, and then you have a sketchbook in the back that maybe you only use, every few days, and that lasts you a lot longer, right? So I kind of like that approach, right? It turned out to be a lot smarter than I expected, and made a lot more sense there. So that to me is the good. Bad side, again, I don't care for this closure here. You can do it, but it's just a little bit of a pain in the neck. I do worry a little bit about the aging of the bungee cords. That said, they are replaceable, right? You can see these go down into grommets down here, and then they just tie in the middle here. So if this does start to age, if they start to get less flexy, you find more bungee cord, you put it in there. It's okay. It doesn't seem to be sewn in any particular way. But nonetheless, the idea of bungee cords aging gracefully is not something that ever works. And actually, speaking of that, this internal knot here is not great. It's not great. I would kind of like to see that at the very top there. Oh, did I mention the bookmark? There are little ribbon bookmarks here for you to keep your place, that is. So the internal knot, I'd like to see that at the top or at the bottom. Not a big deal, though. Next thing, this guy is not sealed around the edges. What I mean by that is that when I have this guy fully sort of locked up, so to speak, what you have is just openness at the outside here, and that means that moisture is very easily able to get in at your notebooks there, but more importantly, everything else is too, and stuff is able to fall out. That is one of the advantages of a full zip around. I can't really put things in here except maybe in the pockets go in this direction and expect them to stay in there. So that can be a kind of a downside for some people, although you also don't end up with like weird zipper fringe around the outside. Whatever. I can work with it, but do keep that in mind. Next thing, this guy, unfortunately, the back cover of this guy is got a little bit of stiffness to it, but not all that much, right? It feels like maybe there's a piece of cardboard or some kind of a plastic on the inside of that. And as a result, you don't ever really get a flat working surface, right? As you're using this guy, what you're going to feel is a fair amount of contouring. And if you've got this on your, resting on your leg, it's just going to conform around your leg. So if you are a person who tends to need a flat surface here, this is really not going to provide it. I bet that you could actually, if that was really important to you, cut out like a piece of metal or something like that and put it inside this pocket in the back. That would make that better. But at the same time, it's definitely not giving you much stiffness to it. That can be a pro and a con. For carry, it's a little bit easier, but otherwise, maybe not so much. And then the other thing is, on this field journal here, the pen loop is a little bit on the external side. It's hanging out here, and certainly once you've got the pen in there and you've locked everything up, it'll kind of stay on the outside there. But at the same time, this is very easy to get taken away, to get pulled off. I sort of would have liked that guy to bias a little bit more internal, or to have something, elsewhere in there. Not the end of any worlds, but it definitely feels a little weird to have the pen hanging out outside the journal, and you'd really want to make sure this is cranked down to avoid losing your pen as you're carrying it, especially with your handle. So, there you go. Final conclusion on this guy, I think there is some room for a couple of little revisions here, but it's a tool that I can see being pretty useful for a subset of people, right? If you are one of those persons who uses a bunch of analog journals, if you've got, lab notebooks or something like that, if you got a bunch of different projects or areas, maybe, you keep your planner notes, you keep a sketch pad, etc., I can totally see that being interesting, because then you kind of have your entire analog life in one particular place. And you have a little bit more flexibility than carrying like a Moleskine or something like that, although given certainly a little bit more bulk. And so I like the idea, right? I think having the 4 notebooks is actually kind of a cool approach. And even if that isn't the way that I go through my life, generally speaking, for what it's worth, pretty profoundly digital at this point in time, and so I kind of made work for this rather than this being an integrated part of my life. But the thing is, so like I said, that's not me. It felt like overkill for me, but I can totally see it being interesting for somebody who's very much like a bullet journal person, or something along those lines, or really relishes that putting pen to paper act, who's an artist and wants floral sketches, etc. I can totally see it being interesting, especially if you have that kind of EDC aesthetic. So final conclusions on this, series of things. Two main big conclusions. One is that I probably shouldn't be doing notebook reviews. That's kind of a funny thing to say at the end of a notebook review, but these are very nice products. But, if you're detecting lack of passion, it's probably a lack of passion for the category, not judgment of this specific gear. I decided, hey, how am I going to find out if I'm enjoying this other than doing it? Turns out, although I've done my best here, it's not really my lane. So sorry, stationary nerds, probably not going to do too many more of these, right? Unless I see something that really jumps out at me. This isn't my domain, and so, take that for what it's worth. But that said, about the products themselves, rather than the meta-awareness of reviewing, I actually do like these guys, right? And particularly, I like the tool roll a fair amount, and I think that this notebook is going to be, the field notebook is going to be very interesting for a set of folks, right? Because if you are like a writer type and you really like pen to paper, if you are a sketchy person, meaning you like to draw, or you're a pen geek, or you're an otherwise paper-focused, I can totally see the appeal. Because what they're doing here is making very analog-focused gear for a specific aesthetic and need, right? There are a million pen rolls out there, right? That's definitely a thing. There are a million different kind of notebooks out there. What they're doing is they're doing it with a very strong aesthetic, right? You can see picturing this off a pulling this off a World War II era motorcycle. That's kind of where they're going for here. So if you're loving the design aesthetic and your needs are matching the kinds of things they're doing, I can see some of this, particularly the tool roll, which I like a fair bit, and the field journal being of a lot of interest. And so, in that case, if you're liking what you're seeing here and you have a use for these kinds of products, I can see you Lochby interested in picking these up. No? Might have purchasing decisions on lockdown? No? All right, Lochby now. Have a good one.